Hello there, this is Filament Corner, corner of filament, corner of fun, and today we are doing a filament review. And that means that, well, the spool is almost empty, it's basically empty. There's a little bit left on there, but this is the flexible filament. And I've had this for probably a couple of months, and I've been using it off and on. I have been trying to keep what the name brand of it a secret, just because I wanted to reveal it on this review. I bought this. This costs around $20. It is a half of a kg, so it's not your standard 2.2 pounds. It's half of that, as you can see. So it's a small spool and you're paying around $20. But they say it's flexible, that's what it's labeled as. And it even feels interesting. So it doesn't feel like PLA, ABS or PETG, and it's just really flexible. And this filament is Excelvan. That's right. Excelvan has a flexible. Now I saw this a couple of months back and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I went and I bought it around $20, like I said, for basically what I'd consider half of a full spool. And it's labeled as flexible. I bought this on Amazon. They do sell on Amazon. And so I guess the biggest question is, well, does it flex? Because it's labeled as flexible. It is 0.5 kg. Speed is 20 to 40 millimeters a second. Your print temperatures is around 190 to 210 C. It is 1.75 millimeter. It says the color is red. And it's labeled as flexible by Excelvan. Well, got out my spinner that I made, and I've got loads of items. I'm going to put them on here, and I'm going to spin them around. I'm going to show them to you in high detail, and you will find out if it flexes or if it doesn't. So we'll cut back to you right here in a second. Alright, so here we have an octopus, and I've printed several of these. This is actually my first print. Got my nice screwdriver here for pointing. So this is the very first print I did with this filament, and it looks alright. I printed at standard typical PLA settings. I only adapted the speed like the filament suggested. So it looks alright. And if we spin it, you can see that the legs look alright too. There's a tiny bit of stringing on him. Most of it I cleaned up. But he just looks alright. However, if you notice, some of the legs are bent up a little bit. And that's because I had to peel him off the print bed. And he's actually not that flexible at all. So I can flex. So I can flex this leg, as you can see. That's about it. I can press down on him, and he's rock solid. He is not moving at all. And that is not even solid. That is 15% infill. And he is solid with about 3 perimeters. So only his legs move. So it doesn't look that good right off the bat. However, it does take learning, like all filaments. And so now we have this guy who was printed at 0.6 shells. So almost 2 shells. because I have a .4 nozzle, so almost 2 shells. And if you look right here, there's a little bit of a hole there from where it didn't get filled in. And obviously the top is missing some pretty important filling. However, he is somewhat flexible. I can bend him. Well, this fellow was also printed at the exact same settings. So what happened here was I forgot that I had vase mode on in Cura. So if you know what vase mode is, then you know that it leaves the top open so that you can use it as a vase, and that's why my first octopus with these settings didn't have a top on him. I suspected that after I saw the top. So he's alright. He looks solid. You know, he looks alright. He looks nice and solid. And he is bendable. I can squeeze him. He's a bit hard to squeeze, but I can squeeze him. So he is flexible. And he's solid. And much like this one, they are completely hollow. So I printed these with no infill. And that's kind of where the issue begins. It seems that as you put more infill, they become more stiff and non-flexible. So here's a vase. This is the six-sided vase off of Thingiverse, and just like the octopus, I will link everything in the description of the video. And it looks alright, and I actually did put water in it, and there's only one spot where it leaks. This was printed in vase mode, so one perimeter, one bottom, no top, and it looks alright. And it is really flexible, so I can do like all the Ninja Flex clips that you see on the internet, and I can just squeeze it. If somebody wants, hey Excelvan, if you want, here you go. Take this clip right here. So it looks alright. I can easily flex that, and that was using vase mode. So it is flexible, but it's not flexible. And this is my first flexible filament, so it's really kind of hard to compare it against something I've never done before. So here's another vase. This was made off of a customizer that I made. Well, I didn't make the customizer. I made this vase off of it. And I printed it in vase mode just so that I could see this right here. And actually, you can somewhat see that it's partially fused in some areas and not in some other ones. That could just be my printer. And if we spin it around, you know, it looks nice. Obviously this is much thicker than the other vase I showed you. However, I can still flex it somewhat. Now, the next thing that I have is cones. And I designed these cones because I couldn't find any in on Thingiverse real quick and easy, and I actually have time lapses of each of these printing. So here's the first cone. And well, while the outer shells look alright, the top is just terrible. And the reason why is because I was using the stock cooling fan for my printer, which is just a 30mm axle fan, which is absolute rubbish. And that's why the top of this looks really bad. And I squeezed it, and that right there happened whenever I squeezed it a certain way. The layers delaminated on it. So that kind of sucked. Still smells like lavender. Yeah, I did that, not the filament. You can see it in the time lapse if you slow it down. Still smells like lavender. So obviously, as you can see, this one has a better tip on it. However, there's a few points on it where it's sort of missed. You see right there's one of them. And right there's two of them. Now, this was using the DIY cooler that uses a radial or squirrel cage fan. And as you can see, the cooling was much better on this one. The tip is much better, and I can flex this one. Once again, no infill. And I can flex it. So the next thing is this cone. This safety cone, I made it real quick. I didn't see any on Thingiverse that I wanted to print. And if we look right here, you can see where the printer was doing the layers. You can see that it made that terrible line there. And the problem with this versus other plastics is obviously if you have that right there in a normal plastic, you could try to scrape it off with a knife or something. You could try to cut it off, or if it was ABS, you could try to acetone smooth it off. But with this, if you scrape it or you bend it, it turns this sort of whitish color. So not only does it make the part look odd, but it was also very hard to get any of that off. You can see I tried to get it off beforehand with a knife to show this right here. Now, that's not to say that this filament has no use at all and that it's absolute rubbish, because as you can see, some prints have worked, some have not. In terms of flexibility, it's really just at the end of the day, a support issue, or at least from what I've found. Perhaps my settings have been wrong this whole time, and there's a magical setting out there. But you can print functional prints with this, and here is my phone case. Now, it's not the prettiest phone case. I did mess up with the actual side parts here to hold the phone in, and instead of reprinting and wasting plastic, I just took some scrap plastic to use as those corner tabs. And this works quite well, because, as you can see, it flexes, so it flexes right out. Now, I did try to take this up, and it was stuck on there, and whenever a print gets stuck onto the bed really well, and you try to manually scrape it up, you do get these white lines, which, like I said, that relates to damaging the surface of the filament, leads to these discoloration in it. Now, another thing that I tried to print was a benchy, and I tried to print it flexible. However, my flexible means no support material, and well, benchies are not exactly made for no support material. So any sensitive viewers out there to beautiful benchies, do look away. Viewer discretion here. It just it is. You can tell there are problems here, and this was printed with only 5% infill on Cura, because this little cargo box, it'll print in midair if you do not have any support under it, which is why I say this is a support needing model. And obviously, as I turn it, you can see there are loads of issues with it. I don't strive for the highest professional quality, but I do try to at least get the floor to be solid, so I can't stick a screwdriver in it. And the top and the smokestack is just terrible. And that is, once again, I was trying it with the stock cooling fan, which, as you can see, it's rubbish cooling for this filament and many other types of filaments. However, here is the best benchy that I could produce. There is some stringing, and There's a little bit of distortion here, I know. But this looks a lot better than that other benchy. Still not the best, but it looks a lot better. You can see the chimney is much better. And that's because I was actually using settings to try to make a benchy look better. And I was using the DIY cooler instead of the stock fan. So I'm sure somebody that really worked into professionally level calibrating on the filament could pull a professional looking benchy. But at the same time though, this one, the only real place that it flexes is on the sides here, and if you try to flex the top, it'll delaminate these layers because of how these lay down. And if we look at this one, they do also, the sides do also bend, but I mean that's about it. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have any failures with this. Here is by far the most spectacular shipwrecked benchy that I've ever seen. That is how I found it on the build plate, laying on its side with a nice big glob of filament on top of it, like that right there. And as you can see, this was, well, at least it was somewhat becoming an okay benchy. There's a little bit of a problem there of cooling, but it was on its way, and well, it came loose off the build plate. They do advertise on Amazon that you can print without a heated bed, and so this one was started and it just come loose. I am using a glass bed, so that could possibly account for it. However, not every print was like this, and other than the benchy, there's only one other series of models that had this problem, and that would be my tires. That's right, I printed out tires, and as you can see, this one, it's just up here at the top, it's just all messed up. So I printed these tires to go on wheels that I designed for an RC car, and this wheel, it looks like complete rubbish. You can't really use this that well for my application. It is flexible, but it just looks rubbish. And I've got one for each set of tires I printed too, as you can see. Once again, up at the top, looks absolutely terrible. And finally would be this one right here. There's a little bit of a stringing, but that's because the inside does come in a little bit, and Cure would not recognize it as needing supports, so it was printing that inside floating, and it did cause a little bit of stringing. But you can see on the middle of this, it is just terrible. And this one actually reached over while it was printing, and I just tapped it and it moved. It wasn't attached, so more than likely the other tires come loose too. However, besides the benchy and the tires, that was the only things that I had to come loose from the build plate. Now, most of my models I printed with a build plate heated up to 50 degrees Celsius, and the parts just adhered better than not having any heat. And here we go, I'll show you a much better tire. And there you go, there's another one. Much better. And they flex, and they've got a nice texture for a tire. And those are for this little fella right here. And that'll be an entirely different video on its own. However, the tires are flexible filament. They have good traction. These are the best tires I've made so far for grabbing the ground. And I know this RC car looks terrible. However, I wanted to make an RC car, and I I wanted to take the guts out of another RC car. So that's what I did on that. Now, another test that I did was these right here. So this is PLA and this is the flexible material, and this was just a pain to do. This was really hard to accomplish on my printer, which only has one extruder. So because you were swapping from a hard PLA to a flexible, that flexible has to have enough force to push out the hard plastic, and you can't really do it manually with this filament because it's flexible. So I had to take apart my extruder assembly after taking out the PLA, putting in the flexible, reassembling it while the printer is paused, which means it's a very tight working area, and then resume the print, because if you do it automatically, my printer has a tendency to reverse all the extruder steps that I do, and so then it just pulls the filament right out. So this was really hard to do for me. However, I know some people want to make flexible parts, and so it will attach to PLA. Obviously, this is not the flexible part, and as you can see, not the strongest part. However, I did get it to here, and as you saw right there, it did break. However, like I said, the more this stuff gets together, the more unflexible it becomes. So that's pretty thick, and as you can see by me squeezing it, it's not that very flexible. So it makes sense that it would snap like that. And another functional print was on the inside of this. So for the remix challenge, I remixed the snowman maker so that I could pour stuff into it. And the main problem with that is that the way this works is the inside, when you put it down together, there's a little air gap, and if you're pouring things, they're going to go through it. So I made this little gasket out of the filament, and it works extremely well depending on what you're pouring, because it acts as a segment in between the two hards that can give a little bit, so it can be compressed much easier than the hard PLA. And finally, on the model list, at least for now, because I'm out of filament, is these little roosters. And I designed this model. It is up on Thingiverse, and I wanted something quick that I could print, and this is it. And it's hollow, so I can press on it, but it's pretty bad. It's got holes right here. The top is terrible. The top cone, I should say. There's a hole here. There's a hole here. And this back tail looks like absolute rubbish. Not to mention the hole right there. And that was using the stock fan, so of course the top of it looks terrible. Well, okay, there you go. There's another one. And I tried changing flow. I tried changing all different kinds of settings to try to fix these holes that I was getting in it. And I just, as you can see, it was just really the same. Holes here, the top's better because I was using better cooling. Hole here, rubbish there. Finally, after going through a lot of things, I finally went and I managed to get this print. And this is a much better print. Now there's a little bit of a line separation here. However, nice top, nice back, no holes in the tail. Little tiny bit of blobbing right there. No holes up here. This is just a really good print, other than the line separation on that one line. and it is hollow. However, as you can see, whenever you flex this one, it produces that. And that one was printed at 205. Normally I was printing at 210 because it was coming out at a nice fine consistency. But like I said, I changed a lot of my settings. And so here is this one. And I turned off retraction for this one. And it did make the difference in the end, because as you can see, that line is no longer there. It still looks alright. There's a little bit more blobbing on it on the tail. Obviously it can't retract. So a little bit more blobbing, a little bit more stringing on it. However, no line separation on this model, which is really good. However, it is flexible. So there's the bottom of it. So that is all the models. Overall, it is flexible, but it's not flexible. I want to call it a semi-flex. However, I've never dealt with any flexible types of materials, so it's really hard to call it. But you've seen my results here. Obviously, flexes. This, however, does not flex. So I want to call it a semi-flex because that's the only thing that I can think of to call something like this that can flex, but as it builds up more and more, it becomes non-flexible. I really hope that I can test some more flexible materials in the future from different makers to really get a good idea on if this actually is more of a semi-flex than a flexible. Because honestly, I can't compare it to something else because it's the first I've ever done. It does flex, so they were not lying. It's just, in my results, not everything flexed. Or at least the infield or fixed shells did not flex. So no printing an octopus with support and then it just flexing in your fingers. But $20, what I would consider half of a standard roll, 0.5 kg. And I did find ways to make it useful, as you've seen. I found different ways to use it as a useful material. It can bond to PLA, however, as you saw, it's not got that much of a flex as it more and more of it gets together. So if you want to use it as a living joint, that had better be a thin living joint. Otherwise, it'll happen to you like it happened to me, and it'll snap or they were joining up together. So that is it for this review. It does flex. So my main faults here. It does flex. However, don't be deceived into thinking this is the Ninja Flex of $20, because it's not. I do recommend it as a starting flexible filament because I loaded it up. I happen to have the flexible extruder plate mod on my one house, mainly because the original broke. Yeah, plastic. So I had that on there, but other than that, I was running just a direct drive. I wasn't running any fancy Flexion extruder, and it printed without much problem in terms of printing. It was more so in finding ways to make it flexible versus printing. So I would recommend it if you just want to toy around with something semi-flexible. However, if you're wanting Ninja Flex, well, you might have to cough up the price and actually get Ninja Flex. Until I can review some other cheap flexible materials. That is it for now. I hope this has helped you out, and I will see you on the next filament review.